We have developed in the lab an algorithm called CryoGAN, and it relies on this notion of GANs.
This is Dr. Lorraine Donati, who recently graduated with a PhD from EPFL and is now coordinating the activities in imaging at EPFL. As we discussed in a previous video, Lorraine studied the problem of reconstructing the three-dimensional structure of proteins based on some very noisy two-dimensional images of a bunch of such proteins in random inclinations. Recently, Lorraine and her colleagues proposed a new algorithm to achieve this feat, which is based on the idea of GANs. But what's a GAN?
The GAN stands for Generative Adversarial Network. So the adversarial is there because the idea of GANs is to take two neural networks and make them compete against each other. So that's where the adversarial comes from. And the generative is kind of useful to understand the goal of the pipeline. And the goal is kind of to, one of the goals is, for example, to learn to generate samples of an unknown distribution. So the distribution that underlies your data set.
Let's give an example.
There is a typical example of a GAN, which is like the GAN that learns to generate human faces. So let's assume you have a huge data set of human faces, which you can access, for example, through Facebook or Google. And then what you want to do, you want to learn to generate samples that have, let's say, the same statistics that the one in your data set, in your real data set. And the way you're going to do that is that you're going to use your two neural networks. And you want to train them and so that each of them gets better, as good as possible at the role it has to fulfill.
As you might have guessed, the two neural networks are called the generator and the adversary. Let's first talk about the adversary, which is more commonly known as the discriminator.
So the first neural network you're going to have is a discriminator, let's say a discriminator. And that's a neural network that has a very simple task. So it gets images as input. So either one that comes from the real data set, so it's a real human face, or an image that has been synthetically generated by the other network, and we'll come to that. But so the goal of this neural network, the discriminator, is just to take one of these images as input and to decide whether, to determine whether it's a real image, indeed coming from the real data set, or if it has been synthetically generated.
So the discriminator aims to discriminate real images from synthetic images, hence its name.
If the discriminator is right at some point, so he actually succeeded in saying like, this fake image is so bad that I really know it cannot be in the data set, then it will kind of give back information to the second network, telling the other network like, come on, you need to improve yourself because you're not fooling me.
So interestingly, if the discriminator is successful at discriminating real images from synthetic images, then it will send a signal that will allow the generator to improve. But what's brilliant is that if the discriminator is unsuccessful, then the GAN will still be able to exploit this information to self-improve.
So if it's wrong, if it gets fooled, then the discriminator will know, okay, I need to improve myself. Okay, and so you have this thing. So the discriminator, if he's wrong, he improves itself. If he's right, he will tell the other network, so that's the generator, that is trying to generate human faces. You need to improve yourself.
So, in fact, the discriminator will be more like a teacher than an actual adversary.
If you have let's say an appropriate training approach for these two neural networks, they will each get better and make the other gets better. And so at the end, what you succeed in with your generator network is a network that can synthesize human faces that look extremely realistic.
Yeah. To find out just how good this can get, I suggest that you open a browser and type thispersondoesnotexist.com, and you'll be seeing some very impressive synthetic images of human faces.
Okay, so let's assume now that you take the simple GAN and instead of this data set of human faces from Facebook, for example, you take a data set of cryo-EM measurements. So those are those 2D images of the protein under different orientation. So if you just plug that into inside the classical GAN, what you will learn to generate is let's say you learn to generate realistic looking measurements. So is that useful like this? Not really.
Okay, so how did Lorraine and her collaborators adapt GANs for 3D protein structure reconstruction?
The key idea is to kind of plug something on top of that. And what you want to plug on top of that is what we call a cryo-EM physics simulator. So something that is important to understand is that in our lab we have been able to design, we've learned, and that's something done also in the community, ways to have good descriptions of the way the cryo-EM physics work. And so the idea of the cryogan, and it's actually like launched by two of my collaborators, so Arshit Gupta and Mike McCann, who are scientific geniuses. So their idea was to use this knowledge of the way from a 3D structure you get 2D measurements, and to use that to plug inside the GAN. And so the way it works is that now what you say is you're gonna try to find a 3D structure. So because that's the goal you want at the end, you always want to find this 3D structure. So you're trying to find this 3D structure so that the measurements it produces, and that you know how to model, will generate measurements that look like the one of your data set. And the idea is that the better the more likely your protein is the one that actually produces the real data set, the more it will generate realistic synthetic measurements. And so you're kind of pushing your cryogan to learn a 3D volume that is such that it would generate measurements that match the statistic of your real data set.
And there's more. Lauren and her collaborators also studied the mathematics of the algorithm.
Intuitively, it's a nice framework, but actually what Arshit also and Mike added on top of that is a strong theoretical framework. So we have mathematical guarantees that given a certain type of acquisition process, we will indeed recover the good 3D volume.
And this has been quite a novelty in cryo-EM image analysis.
What's interesting to understand is that the classical approach, let's say, of tackling this cryo-EM problem is that you kind of have to alternate between. So you start with your measurements, and you kind of need the angles in the classical framework. So you need to say like this measurement comes from that angle, so that you reconstruct. And the way they do that is kind of through an iterative pipeline. They have a first guess on the angles, and they reconstruct. Then from this reconstruction, they kind of like generate synthetic measurements as well, so that you compare your real data set to the synthetic measurement, and you refine the estimation of the angles for your real data set. And then you reconstruct, and you propagate like this. But what it requires is an estimation of the angle at every step. And the good thing with cryogan is that you completely bypass this. So there is no estimation of the angles with cryogan. So basically at the end, you have a 3D structure. But if you look at your data set, you have no idea if one projection actually was taken from a certain angle.
But what about the results on the empirical side?
We have good results on synthetic measurements, synthetic simulation. But now we're like pushing to further test that on real data, and actually that's why it's very useful for us to have a cryo-EM center coming at EPFL as well.
Exciting! The work by Lauren and her collaborators will soon actually contribute to improving our understanding of proteins. But on the algorithmic side, what else is left to do?
Right now, like everything I've talked about, I've kind of like assumed that you have one 3D structure that's producing your measurements. But actually, like in biology, like your proteins are, most proteins are dynamic entities. So they perform certain types of function by changing their conformations. So what it means in practice is that when you have your measurements, they do not correspond to a single configuration. Basically, like in your sample, 3D samples that you have imaged, you likely have the protein under a different configuration. And if you don't take that into account during the reconstruction, what you will reconstruct is a blurry type of structure. So very like one of the greatest challenges in the field is to design algorithms that can, let's say, like find the different configurations that your 3D proteins actually adopt in its native state, and also why not like quantify like how much time it spends in each of these steps. And what we're very hopeful, so we have preliminary results with cryogan, which is actually something super impressive in our opinion, is we have a framework that can also quantify this. So you have the 3D reconstruction I was talking about, but also you can quantify in which, let's say, like the percentage of your data set that corresponds to one of these conformations, which can have like a huge, positive benefits for the biology community. We hope so, actually.